It's lovely to see you all here, and I hope very much it'll be a useful session, but also I'm seeking to inspire you all as well. So I'll just share my screen. And what I'd like to do today is to, if my screen will share, what I'd like to do today is talk about our archive, which is a living archive for community development, and to learn. And obviously everybody, as Anna said, is in different parts of the world, so we'll all have different experiences. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about a journey. So it's a little bit of a journey to creating an archive. So I'd like to tell you how it came about, just a little bit about what's in it, so you have a bit of a feel. And then sort of a major bit is really creating a new narrative of hope from the evidence in the archive. So basically, I'm arguing that a living archive can give us all hope. I've got some suggestions about growing an interlinked network of archives and some reflection and contact details. And what I'd like to invite you all to do is to respond to what you see and hear, because it is both visual, what I'm presenting, as well as my words. So maybe you could use pen and paper. You could draw or you could write, however you want to do it. And then if we do go into 2 breakout rooms, which I think we can, then maybe we can share with each other your reflections on this archive. So how did it happen? Well, I guess my partner and I, we kept copies of work we've done over 35 years. So community regeneration, environmental regeneration, and it was scattered all over our house. And we were very aware that it was precious, because we knew that a lot of the relevant archives around community development had either been stopped because the government was no longer funding those projects, or the projects had folded, or the workers had been made redundant. So all this knowledge kind of disappeared in the UK around 2010, 2011, 2012. And our son-in-law came to help us tidy the house, he and our daughter. And he noticed all these records, and he started to gather them all together. And he suggested to us, why didn't we take them out of the house and put them in the attic? So suddenly in our attic were all these boxes of different shapes and sizes, all higgledy-piggledy, many of them under the eaves of the roof. I work at Manchester Metropolitan University, and Manchester Metropolitan University has a special collections section in the library. And I popped in there and I asked them if they might be interested in the records. And one of the members of staff, called Jeremy Parrott, he said, sadly, special collections in Manchester Met couldn't take them. They just didn't have the space, but he would help us. And so what he did in the Christmas holidays was he gave us a big room, and he said, bring everything you've got in, and I'll give you boxes, proper archive boxes, and I'll help you think about how you might sort the boxes. So a very, very rough cataloguing, and he was so nice, and we had this huge room, and it was really nice. We brought everything in, and we it made up 22 boxes, so that was wonderful. And then also at the same time, we had made contact with Larissa Bolton, who was an archives officer at Manchester Library, Archives and Local Studies. And Manchester, although it's a city, also has responsibility for the whole of the northwest of England. And the population of the northwest of England is around 7 million. So it's a very big area. And Larissa helped us, and she agreed that she would take the collection in to the libraries. And just before COVID, in December 2019, we took the collection, the 22 boxes, we loaded up. I think we got a neighbour in a van, and we loaded them up and took them to the library. And then COVID happened, and there was a pause in all this. And then recently, last year, I made contact again with the service through a local neighbour, actually, who got in contact with Jenny. And Jenny has been really helpful ever since. And that's how we're here together. So I want to say a big thank you to Manchester Archives, but also to IACD for facilitating this meeting, because this is about taking the ideas of the archive out. So that's just a little look at what it looks like. And if you can see on the boxes on the left-hand side, it's got an initial and a number, and then it's got a subject. So all the boxes have got a number and an initial, but they're also very roughly catalogued. And here's another number. I like this view. It sort of shows you what the resources look like. And this is in the interior of the library. So what's in this collection? Remember, this is, as Anna said, one collection. So it's called accession number 2019/88. That's the number of this little archive. And it covers the period, the 1970s to 2011/15. And it's very broad. So urban and neighbourhood regeneration, nature, quite a lot about nature, community development, learning, community empowerment, and then at lots and lots of different levels. So at a community level, a street level, a neighbourhood level, maybe a ward level, a city level, also regional, and also some material nationally. So it's really nice like that. It's all these different levels, and it's all sorts of different partners. So it's local authorities, it's central government, it's partnerships, businesses, NGOs, and of course, communities. So the records are from myself and from my partner. And I think Jenny will talk a bit more about this, but the archive is now open and accessible at Central Library. So if somebody wants to come and use it, they can. And what is in it? When I was practicing for today, I did go through each of these different projects and programs, but I'm not going to now. But I think, because what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to give you some examples. But I just want to point out to you that what's really interesting about the collection is that some of it is funded nationally by special programs. Some of it is funded by local or run by local authorities, and some is run by kind of NGOs who've got funding. So I think, you know, it's a very important point. There's lots of different sorts of funding here. So the top one on the left, Human Girls Project, was a project started by two second wave women's movement feminists, and then they got special urban program funding for it. So it was an NGO that ran it. Whereas the next one, Tameside Women's Officer, was run by a local authority. That was local authority funded, working on women's equality. And the two bottom ones there, Neighbourhoods Northwest and Northwest Together We Can, were actually regional projects around community development and learning, but funded by central government. So there's a lot of mix of funding. And if you look at the right-hand side, which are projects where my partner Phil Barton, and these are very much environmental and urban regeneration projects. But third one down, Community Technical Aid Centre, was an NGO which got funding. And also Groundwork UK is still going, which is brilliant, a major NGO which secures all sorts of different funding. So it's a really nice mix of different sorts of projects and different sorts of funding. So what is the next step for this particular community development archive? Well, Larissa managed to get a small amount of it properly catalogued, so it explains page by page what's in it. So what is needed is the whole catalogue, the whole archive needs to be catalogued. And in order to digitalize it, or to digitalize some of it, we'll need funding. And then the other point that I think Jenny's been talking about is there will be a lot of other practitioners. They could add their records to the archive. And I guess what I want to share with you today is kind of my bit of my dream and my hope that we would create this living archive for community resilience. So we would secure funding, maybe, working in partnership, maybe with IACD, maybe with university where I work, Manchester Metropolitan, maybe to interview people who were involved, to add further materials, to go back to what we did or other people did and draw out lessons for now, to publicize those lessons. I would love some of this stuff to be shared with children and young people, and then obviously catalogue, but also digitalize it. I think digitalizing is so important because then it's open for everyone. And so what I'm arguing really about the potential of this archive, and remember it's just one archive, and the aim would be to encourage others and support others and link up with other archives. But I want to say that we could create a new narrative of hope for communities working together from the evidence in this archive. Because what this archive is not just a record of projects, what we did in Rochdale or what we did in Cumbria or what we did working nationally for women's equality. It's absolute evidence that you can see what was done. Some of it has been evaluated. You can trace it on the ground. And the evidence for me is it shows that communities working together with support can tackle their own challenges. And by support, I mean they have access to workers, all sorts of workers, community development workers, education workers, Sure Start workers, all sorts of workers, access to funding and spaces to meet and work. And I also think the new narrative of hope is sharing the key ideas, the intellectual property that is embedded in this archive to build upon today. I'm not suggesting about going backwards, I'm suggesting going forward, but learning from the past and what we've done. And the point number 3, I was very sad, very, very sad when all these community development services were closed in 2010 and 2011 and 2012. But I have kind of reframed that now, that I see all these services as pioneering. They were pioneering services. And how can communities build sustainable communities where people can get on together, where we can sort our differences together? And I think we can use these pioneering services to rebuild informed practice today. And then the archive has a lot of examples of good practice in equality, diversity, inclusion, partnership working, lots of examples of bottom up and top down and sideways, all sorts of partnerships, working at street level, neighborhood, working with nature. How do you work with nature together with communities? And then examples on governance about how we learn together and interdisciplinary cross-boundary. And this is a lovely example. It's the Ranger Service, which was neighbourhood wardens. I think the document is from about 2001. And neighbourhood wardens were funded nationally to start off with to help communities solve issues. So they helped people get on if they had local neighbour disputes. They were able to pick up if there was tensions around domestic violence in the household, because they'd simply walk around neighbourhoods. They helped around litter. They helped organise neighbourhood days. They were just a wonderful service to help communities. And the funding for that went. And I think the archive shows how communities working together with support can tackle their own challenges. So they can build together flourishing, sustainable communities. Now, I'm not romanticizing this. There are lots and lots of challenges, but what I am saying is together, that there's this evidence that how communities work together. And the archive has examples of how to and good practice, as well as national and local evaluations. And just to say that some of this material might already be on the web, but it's very hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for. So some of the examples, if that report, the Neighbourhood Services report, that was a report on what they did. I have social inclusion annual reports. What did community development workers do in neighbourhoods year on year? Such interesting stuff. Stuff about groundwork and the partnerships they built. And then the policy action team. Some of you will know that the government in 2000, published a national strategy for neighbourhood renewal, and they had policy action teams on a whole load of issues for communities, one of which was community self-help. So that's a lovely example of a booklet produced by Groundwork, evaluating the work Groundwork did. And what I should say to you about Groundwork, they pioneered these amazing partnerships of community, business, NGOs, all working together to improve an area. And something I feel very passionately about is sharing key ideas. So all the work that I'm talking about in this archive was funded by the public sector. And when services were closed, the intellectual property was destroyed or became very hard to access. And an archive collection which is digitalised and catalogued can open up this intellectual property, I believe, to the whole world. And I think that's really exciting. And communities can build on these ideas and not reinvent the wheel. So it's not about this was how we should do it, this is how we did do it, can we learn from it? So that's a lovely example on the screen. Stockport Community Development Strategy from 2006. I was actually working in another local authority in the northwest of England, Rochdale, in 1991, when they totally reorganised their whole local authority into neighbourhood services, and underpinning neighbourhood services were community development teams. I don't have a lot of records, but I have some reports on community development, just so exciting. The National Community Development Challenge report was 2006, and in 2011, which you can see as there was then a change of government, so all the community development workers were being made redundant, we developed a Northwest Community Development Vision. So on the right-hand side, I'm nearly done, folks, by the way, just to go through. The right-hand side is the Community Development Challenge report. Just have a look at the top. It was produced by government, and also at the bottom, Together We Can. Together We Can was a regional programme funded by government, amazingly cheap. It was about £250,000 a year. We ran seminars, workshops all over the northwest of England. We brought people together to say, how can we work to build thriving communities? So Together We Can also produced reports and publications. I'll come back to the image on the left. So we can learn from the pioneering services to rebuild today. What did we do in the past and what can we do in the future? And this lovely example on the screen is from awards from 2011, and it's all over the Northwest. And just one I want to talk about. One of them is the competition was for people to say when they'd done something in their local community, and we all went out to visit. And I went to visit one which was fair trade in a primary school, and all these children, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, were persuading their parents to buy fair trade products. I mean, it was just such a lovely example of partnership and working together. And the other one I want to pull out is that in the archive, there are examples of equality and diversity and inclusion as bottom-up, real initiatives to improve people's lives. So here I want to go back to this image on the left. That is from Human Girls Project, which was about accessing girls and young women to youth services. But as you can see on the images, if you just have a look, if they're clear enough, the top left-hand corner is about a young woman who thinks she might be a lesbian, and that's an image. The bottom left-hand corner is about disability and making sure that services are available for disabled young people. And this example on the right-hand side is from Black History Month in another local authority where it became part of the civic calendar, and we were very proud of it. So it's demonstrating and evidencing the importance of equality, diversity, and inclusion to communities as part of community development work. So what about going forward? So firstly, one of the ideas could be an interlinked network of archives in the UK. I'll start with the UK and then I'll talk about international. So I know that the Bishopsgate Archive in London has a collection of national community development records. Anna actually from IACD found out University of Bolton, Northwest England, I think that's the University of Greater Manchester now, my mistake, wants to create a community development archive. Liverpool University has got Mersey Basin Campaign archives. That was to clean up the River Mersey. I've already made links with an NGO called Citizens Network and Citizens Democracy and SOS Democracy, because obviously community development underpins democracy. And there may and will be others in Scotland, Wales. And then what about internationally? Well, I have talked with Anna, and I think Anna will talk a little bit about this, but we can, IACD could, and I think would be able to promote resources about archives, so to signpost people on their new website. And there will be, I'm absolutely positive, international archives in community development, maybe in other countries. I think on the call today is one of our trustees from South Africa. Maybe there are collections there in the universities there. So what I'm hoping is that this workshop can be the start of a process that we could take forward together to encourage participants to create their own archives, think about what they've got, and to think about how can we share a network, pass good practice across boundaries and into the future. And so what I'd like to invite you to do is have a think about your responses to this local archive. It's just one example. And does it spark any response in you? Because sometimes your immediate response is a very true one. And we could share it when we either meet in separate breakout rooms or all together. I would invite you to think whether you have any materials which could be donated to an archive, or you know of somebody else who might do. And then the final question for me was whether you might be able to offer support to this archive. You might be part of an interested organisation, I don't know. And I know that Jenny will pick up some of the broader issues around archives. And then finally at the bottom, I put our contact details. So Jenny, who was going to talk to you next, my own contact details, and then Phil, who's my partner Phil, who's the other half of this archive. And obviously I haven't talked very much about his records, but he is very interested and very keen on keeping that side going as well. So I think that's me, and I hope very much what you've got for me is that it's a narrative of hope, working together with our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helena. That was absolutely fascinating. Not least because one of those publications that you shared, I have a copy of, a hardback copy of in my own personal archive. Not that I ever called it a personal archive, but yes, I'm one of those people who has got a whole pile of stuff that goes back several decades. And I think that's one of the things that actually makes this a real engaging discussion, because all of us will have resources. And for me personally, aside from thinking about this on a professional basis, I really do think that the opportunities to digitize resources that we all have is a fundamental thing that we really should try and look at how we can support that, because it is material that we don't want to be lost. And we can't all share the one hard copy of a document that we have. So plenty of challenges there. Thank you so much indeed. I'll save the rest of my thoughts for the breakout rooms. Now, next steps. Are we going into the breakout rooms now, Helena? Is that what you would like, or are we going to hear from Jenny first?
I possibly thought hear from Jenny first. I don't know what you think, Jenny, in terms of
I'm happy to go now. I'm ready to go now.
That's great. Over to you then, Jenny.
Great. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Helena. I'll just share my screen. Okay. So hi everyone, it's great to be here with you. As Anna said, I'm an archives officer based at Manchester Central Library, where we hold the community development archive that Helena compiled with Phil, along with lots of other collections. And today I'm going to talk to you about archives more broadly, and the service that we deliver here in Manchester, some current projects that we're working on, and then a little bit about the community development archive. And I'll also share some links to resources that could potentially be helpful to you if you are interested in preserving the heritage of the community development work that you do. So what are archives? And this is a very broad question, and people understand archives in different ways. I suppose the way that I'm speaking to them about you today is from my position as someone who works in the heritage sector as an archivist. But I will also say that people's understanding of archives have evolved a lot in the last sort of few decades, I suppose, so that we don't just think of archives in terms of very old historical material anymore that you might need to decipher handwriting in, and relating to the history of prominent families, for example, or, you know, great men, which has often been a focus of history before. Now, I think certainly local authority archive services like Manchester, where I work, we're interested in really working with collections that represent the city much more broadly, the people of the city, the activities going on in the city and the wider region. And that's where collections like the Community Development Archive are really important accessions for us, because they fill in gaps from things that we might have collected previously. So I'll give you a bit of an overview. And I'm aware that I'm not speaking to a heritage audience, so I've tried to keep it fairly, I suppose, just quite broad, but it may well be stuff that you already know. I hope there's something new in there for you. So archives can be any format, really. They can be historical papers, letters, maps, plans, photographs, sound recordings, films, and born digital material. So obviously now that so much work and social interaction is done digitally, archivists, if you want to preserve the historical record, you have to have techniques and tools for managing that born digital material as well. And all of these records that are collected in archives are they're collected and kept and preserved because they can tell us important things about the past. And knowing things about the past, knowing more about the past, helps people in different ways. It helps us to understand the world and where we come from. And it might help us to learn from mistakes that have been made in the past and do things differently. Or as Helena alluded to in her presentation, it can be a way to learn about things that have gone well and try them again. And they're often used by academics to undertake research on a wide range of subjects. I suppose that's one of the uses of archives that people might be most familiar with. But it's, you know, that they can be used much more broadly than that. So they can tell us wonderful stories about inspiring people. They can be used as evidence in court cases, for example, by people trying to correct a historic injustice. And they can be used in very practical ways. So someone might need a plans to a building, for example, the original plans, if they're doing some extensive refurbishment. So it can be as practical and basic as that. Certainly the service that I work in, a lot of the people who use our archives are family historians who are really interested in finding out about the people in their family in generations past and the lives that they led. And others might be particularly interested in how the city has changed the makeup of the city in terms of, you know, the buildings and the rivers and the roads and that kind of thing. So people look at old photos or maps of Manchester to see what it was like then, what it's like now. And another important use, which I think is really relevant for our discussion today, is that sometimes people might have a political imperative behind the way that they want to use archives and the work they want to do, particularly in terms of looking at their own heritage and their own history, whether that's from a more personal perspective or within an organisational or, you know, across a sector. So, for example, there's a project that I in a previous volunteering role, actually, when I was a student, was involved with, which was trying to preserve the history and heritage and capture the history and heritage of the adventure playground movement in London. And that was really done because so many adventure playgrounds had closed down, and the play workers and staff who were at the remaining adventure playgrounds really wanted to prove how valuable those playgrounds were to the children and the communities that they served. And so they used a heritage project that was funded externally by the National Lottery Heritage Fund as a tool, really, to advocate for continued funding for the adventure playground movement in London. So there are lots and lots of different ways to use an archive. And we also try to collect and look after the material for future generations so that they can learn about our lives and the world that we live in 2025. So just to tell you a little bit more about the archives collections at Manchester and some of the work that we do. So I'm part of a team of people who work to collect and preserve and make accessible the archives that we hold. We have a huge volume of material here at the library because we are actually two different archive repositories. You'll see I've got a very long sort of organisational signature. So it's Manchester Archives and Local Studies, and that focuses on the history of the city particularly. And then it's also the Greater Manchester County Record Office. So that's really focused on the Greater Manchester region. So all of the boroughs have their own archive services as well, but if anything relates to more than one of the boroughs, then we tend to take it in here. So these two very large repositories were brought together under one roof more than 10 years ago now to make it easier for people to access records from both of the repositories. And we have over 1,800 collections, and that doesn't include all of the library stock and the special collections material. So that is just, the archival material. And that translates to about 500,000 records, and that's an estimate. We don't have an exact figure. It's likely to be higher, actually. And in addition, we're part of a partnership called Archives Plus, and that's a collection of organisations all based here at Manchester Central Library. So the other partners are the North West Film Archive and the Ahmed Iqbal Ullah Race Relations Resource Centre and the Manchester and Lancashire Family History Society. So we all support each other's work, and it means that visitors to the library can access the collections from all of those organisations in one place. So that was the idea, that it was a sort of one-stop shop, essentially, for people visiting the library. So as a recognised place of deposit, we hold a lot of public records. So that includes things like hospital records, court records, and the records of Manchester City Council. But as I mentioned earlier, we also try to collect material so the archives reflect life and activity in the city more broadly. So we take in the records of different groups and societies. So, for example, tenants groups, arts organisations, campaign groups, and we also sometimes take in the collections of local history researchers. They're often a really wonderful goldmine of information, and photographs that members of the public will deposit with us quite regularly. And we sometimes also help to generate new archive material through projects that include oral history recordings, which is also something that might potentially happen around the Community Development Archive one day. So I think that, another thing I wanted to mention is that we've realised we have to be more active in terms of our collecting, really, to make sure that we're getting the material that really represents the city. So, for example, during the pandemic, we put a call out to people to submit digitally material that reflected their lives during the pandemic. So we've got that sort of pandemic collection as well, COVID collection, that people sent in to us, and that was obviously generated by the public, and then we've got that as part of our digital archive as well. So the Community Development Archive that Helena deposited with us is an example of this much broader collecting focus. And there are so many stories to be told about life in Manchester and the region, and we want people to use the collections in our care to discover and share the stories that matter most to them. And I truly think we have, something of interest to everyone probably. So an important part of the work of the archives team is to encourage and facilitate people to access the records that we hold, whether that's at the library in our search room, which you can see in the top photograph, or if it's in an exhibition in one of our exhibition spaces. We have quite a large exhibitions area in the ground floor of Central Library where we can display original archival material, or digitally. So that might be through creating online resources, making digital copies of registers, for example, available through family history websites, which are very popular with family historians. And there's lots of other ways that we can share material. The archives exhibition area is sometimes used to highlight our own collections, but also it's sometimes used by other local organisations who want to display their own heritage material. So it's really a resource for the wider community. And we do outreach and engagement work in schools as well, and with schools who come to visit us. And we usually also have some kind of volunteer opportunity for people who are interested in working with archives. So we want as many people as possible to have the opportunity to engage with us and with the collections. And so people, we hope that there's a different, people can find a way that works for them. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of some project work that is ongoing at the moment, because that's probably the most sort of common way that archives are able to make specific collections, especially if it's a sort of a collection of the size of the Community Development Archive. That's how they can make it accessible through project work that's usually funded externally. So the first photograph on the left of the screen is from the Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People archive. So that is from the GMCDP. So we've been working in partnership with the GMCDP for over 3 years now. So they applied as an organisation to the Wellcome Trust and received funding for a 3-year project to catalogue and make accessible the GMCDP collection. And there's a website which was actually created prior to that project with Heritage Lottery funding. So I'll just go on to that now so you can see a little bit of that material. So this was a sort of taster of the collection before they started in on the main project. And these are some of the items in their collection. And it's an organisation that was established in 1985. So they recently had their sort of 40th anniversary. And they've always been quite active in documenting and preserving their own history, as well as that of the wider disabled people's movement and individuals within the movement as well. And they hold thousands of documents, photographs, video, audio tapes, banners, posters, placards, badges, T-shirts, rare books, leaflets, reports. So I feel as though, there's some similarities between the material held in the Community Development Archive and this collection. And one of their main focuses for their project was accessibility. The GMCDP employed the project workers, but they're based here in the library with us. So we've supported them with archives or advice and assistance. And they've also advised us on making our collections more accessible and provided training for our team on that and other things. So it's been a really sort of fruitful and productive partnership. And the other project that I wanted to highlight is a recent project that was funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund based on our local image collection. So this is a collection of over 100,000 images of Manchester. And these had been available online for some time, but the previous website was very difficult to use, basically reached the end of its life. So we applied for funding to create a new website and digitize more of the images in the collection so that they're available on the new site. So I can just show you that new site now. So here it is. And to help us with this project, so we had a project worker employed to manage the project, but also we have had a team of volunteers. So they've been working in the search room over the last 18 months, coming in for different shifts during the week, and they've been scanning images and digitizing them for us and recording relevant information about the images that they're going on. So one of the features I wanted to point out on this is you can actually you can make your own collection. So you can highlight your favorite images, and then you can, oh well, I don't need to share that with you, I suppose, but yeah, you can understand your own collections, and then you can keep them. So that's a really popular feature for people, and it's something if you had a living archive and people were using it potentially, and you made something available online, people could share, could collate their own selection of resources potentially. Okay, I'll just go back to the slideshow now. I'll just move on now to talk a little bit about the archive that Helena deposited with us, which obviously she's already given you quite a lot of information about in her presentation. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about where it sits in our collections and sort of plans for the future. So it's only partially catalogued. Only 3 of the projects that it covers have been catalogued. So a key goal for us is to try and catalogue the material, but because this is because of capacity issues and because cataloguing is pretty it's a slow job, it's a slow and intensive job. So generally we get cataloguing done by externally funded projects. So that's something we'd have to look into. As Helena mentioned, it is accessible to people in our archive search room. So if anybody is interested in looking at the material, they can make an appointment with us and view it. That's not a problem. And ultimately, as Helena has discussed, we want to make the valuable information that is in this collection available to people currently working in the field of community development, as well as those who fund such work. And there are a number of different ways that this might happen. So I've mentioned a few of the funded projects that we've worked on more recently. I think one of the things that Helena and I have discussed is that it might need quite a bit of research work to kind of draw out that key evidence in order to create the kind of resource that we envisage. So it might be possible that we partner with higher education institution to help us realise this. In the meantime, we're hoping to advertise a short 3 to 4 month research project next year based on this collection to PhD students, and that would be part of a scheme that places PhD students with organisations like ours for non-academic work experience. So they get some valuable experience and we get a researcher essentially for free for 3 to 4 months. So during that time, they could either potentially catalogue one of the other series within the collection, or they could conduct some research, identifying the key learning that can be done, and maybe starting to compile a guide, a finding aid that could be used as the basis of future, more ambitious funded projects. So finally, before I finish, I just wanted to share a few resources with you. And the first one is the International Council on Archives, which is obviously an international organisation. The others are all based in the UK, but they have lots of resources available online. Some of the Archives and Records Association, some of their resources you have to be a member to access, but not all of them. And the National Archives, obviously the national organisation in the UK, but they have loads of really useful guidance and information on their website. And in terms of just thinking, I meant to say earlier that in terms of the living archive idea, and it's not uncommon for when something is publicised, an archive is publicised, as we're hoping to do with this one, people tend to come out from, they realise that, oh, I have some of this material. So that is something we're familiar with. It's something that's happened before. So we can certainly incorporate those new records into the collection if they're from the Northwest region. and it'd be something that we would welcome, so that we can reflect the history of the community development practice in the region more accurately. So I think that's everything from me with my presentation. Thank you, everybody. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was absolutely fascinating. Helena and Jenny, absolutely really fascinating insight into the world of community archiving. I feel like a kind of a door with a big long tunnel has just opened up in front of me, and I'm beginning a journey there, and it's prompted lots of thoughts for me personally, thinking about IACD. Janine, I'm sure from an IACD point of view, it might have had a similar effect for yourself as well, and for all the organisations we work with and the locations we work. I don't want to say too much more at the minute because I am conscious of the time, and we want to give everyone the opportunity to share reflections and thoughts around what you've heard, and the ideas that it might have prompted for you, and the opportunities as well. So we do have an option now to break out into a couple of breakout rooms. But I am just kind of thinking a little bit about the number that we have here, and whether it is worthwhile doing that maybe for a shorter period of time, just to get some reflections, and then come back together in about 10 or 15 minutes. Would that be okay? Everybody back? Yeah. So, okay. Okay, it's probably useful then. We're rapidly running out of time. We needed a longer dedicated period for this topic of conversation, I think. But maybe a very quick kind of sense of what was being discussed in both groups might be useful. Helena, the group that you were in, do you want to give us a flavour of the key things people were talking about?
The notion of people welcoming it being a living archive, and maybe different sorts of recordings, not just text, but sound or history, people's history. So I think that sounded really important to do. And maybe it could be part of education and curriculums and stuff to bring it in from the beginning of a project, to have the idea of archiving it. Anybody else want to add briefly?
No? Well, just in the interests of keeping things moving. In the group that I was in with Janine and Morris and Emmanuel and Judy and Jenny, we shared a little bit about our interests and backgrounds and what we're involved in doing, but a couple of the things that came up in terms of the conversation was a bit of a reference to how this kind of work can be resourced even at a local, sort of country level or within country level. Janine was sharing some examples of colleagues working around sort of rehabilitation and basket weaving, and noticing the differences in the quality of the grasses, and that was associated with climate fluctuations. So that was very much about kind of a particular craft skill that people were learning, how that was being used, but also what that meant in terms of what was happening in a wider context, sort of environmentally, and capturing some of that, and also the benefits and the values of that activity as well for people, and the process that was involved. Jenny was talking then in response to that about ideas of seeking, maybe looking at options for resourcing, financial resourcing, particularly in relation to digitising, around cultural and heritage funding particularly, and how that could be tapped into, but perhaps would need to be slightly bigger a size of a project, drawing out learning, maybe with workshops and using exhibition opportunities as well. There is something that can be shown and people can come and engage and interact with for a period of time, supported with discussions and workshops and sort of public engagement. And then Judy was asking about the opportunity to connect with others around a partnership approach to some of this as well, with other organisations at a local level, and that was based in Haringey in London. And again, Jenny was quite useful in terms of giving us some pointers around that. And then Morris was talking about the opportunities to kind of foster connections and networks with other organisations in other parts of the world that might be interested or involved in similar activity. And that's definitely an area that IACD can support members around. Those are the notes that I had kind of broadly mentioned, but noted. But have I missed anything from anybody who was in my group or the group I was in?
You haven't missed anything, but I'd also add the Bishopsgate Institute in London. For any London-based heritage projects, could be a really interesting organisation to approach, because they take in all sorts of interesting collections and do interesting work. So they'd also have lots of advice. In fact, I don't think it's just purely restricted to London, but they're based in London and they do have a lot of London-based material. But they're a good organisation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I mean, I do think there is a lot more that, we could probably explore and talk about in relation to this idea. Maybe it would be useful to give a little bit of time for people to absorb some of the detail. I mean, I just think it was quite mind-blowing, really, looking at those pictures of all of those boxes and getting a sense of the scale and the scope and the breadth of what you're actually talking about, Helena. And then how the scale and the scope of how all of that can be used, and the range of uses, from what Jenny was talking about. And it also then made me start to think about, yes, it's not just the written text, it's also all those other mechanisms that we have for recording the oral histories, but also, on a global context. Thinking about how we can capture and share the wisdom of different cultural traditions around the world, and Indigenous wisdoms, those visual histories that people have. So there is just so much. I'm not quite sure where you go with it. But I'm going to stop talking and hand back to you, Helena, because I'm sure you've got lots of reflections that you want to kind of share with us before we have to draw this session to a close.
Yeah, I just want to sort of say thank you all so much, because I think one of our challenges is that there's a very dominant narrative at the moment, which is about depression and doom and gloom and dividing people. And I think these narratives that we have from our community development history all over the world are a very strong voices, which are a hopeful narrative. And I think for me, why I'm so grateful that we've had this meeting is that together, I think we can do something, but it isn't possible on our own. And I always thought, I remember when we published the community development vision for the northwest of England in 2011, and we launched it, and everybody was being made redundant, and all the projects were being closed down. And what I now feel is that all that work we did, it was created over about 3 years and workshops all over the northwest, that we could reuse it and take it forward. So I think, what I'd ask you all to do maybe when you finish today is just maybe write some reflections down about, do you feel it's a hopeful vision, and maybe what have you got, and ideas for what we might do next, because I think capturing that's really important. And I don't have answers, but I just know that together we can think this out. So a very big thank you to Jenny for taking it in and offering, the home. And Jenny's been very supportive about how do we keep going when there isn't a lot of money, but actually small steps do add up. And then thank you to Anna for giving this space. And then finally, thank you to you all for coming and sharing your experiences and thinking about how we can take this forward as a living, hopeful archive. That's what I want to leave you with. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Helena, again, and Jenny. Very powerful insights, and I absolutely agree with you. I think there is what exists is hugely positive, and the task is how we can capitalize and learn from that and use that. And it kind of reminded me as well at one point when you were talking about the Sankofa bird image of the mythical bird. I think originates from Ghana, and it's of a bird that is moving forward, but its head is turned backwards and it's looking backwards to collect an egg. And the analogy is that the Sankofa bird is reaching backwards to collect what was good and what we can bring forward in order to benefit the next steps, the next stages, and the future. And I think that this archive and archives like it hold a huge amount of that opportunity. Just from an IACD point of view, I think there are opportunities for IACD to look at how we can support this. The organisation is very keen to develop an area on our new website that facilitates the sharing of resources and materials. And that could absolutely also include details of the different archives that might exist, including this one, and how people can engage and interact with them. But Helena, I'm also really conscious that next year our World Community Development Conference is in Glasgow, which isn't a million miles away from where you are, or Jenny. And perhaps you might think about framing a workshop around today's topic of conversation and what you're involved in, that others from different parts of the world who are coming to the conference could also be part of. I think that would be really interesting to share as well. And yes, I would be very interested. I'm sure trustees would to hear of any other ideas that anybody today has taking away from today's workshop. And we can bring all of that back together. So I think that probably brings us towards the end of the session, unless anybody has a burning question or comment you'd like to make before we draw to a close. No? Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much on behalf of IACD, everybody, for joining today. I hope you found it interesting and look forward to seeing you at some point in the future. Take care.